we've got to make the distinction. I've said this a lot in other pieces of work. But we've got to make the distinction between attunement and agreement, because often they get conflated, the wires get crossed, and there's a confusion in terms of what we're speaking to when we're coming into the discussion with these terms. For me, there is a big difference between attunement and agreement. Attunement says, I understand and I can identify why you are arriving into this conversation with these specific points of views, articulations, belief systems, etc. Agreement says we're on the same page. We're on the same page. I think the same way as you. We are, synced up in terms of how we're approaching this conversation. But often in the context of education, and I've seen this firsthand in my work, when educators might hear me say to a young person, I can understand why you've arrived at that point, or why you think that about masculinity. I understand why you like or follow insert influencer name here. I can understand why that person means so much to you. That's registered as Lewis is agreeing. Wait, hold on a second. Lewis is almost appeasing this conversation, or creating room to sort of say we're on the same page. Attunement says I understand how you've arrived at the point you've arrived at. It creates room to recognize I see you in this space, and I understand how you have arrived at those ideas or with those ideas and those belief systems. There's not a judgment element there, there's a recognition. If I understand why or where someone is coming from in the conversation, I can create room to explore and expand those ideas. When I see somebody in the space as they are, they feel seen in the space as they are, but there's also room for them to recognize I'm not coming in with that acknowledgement with what I call the tautology. The sense of, well, you think that's terrible, that's disgusting, that's awful. Because although those ideas and belief systems at times often need to be challenged, explored, and metabolized, how you approach it matters. You can absolutely hold someone accountable with compassion and grace in those spaces. You can absolutely create room for that challenge and critique by recognizing and acknowledging how someone's arrived at that space at that point in time. It doesn't need to be in that position of judgment and shame, but it does need to be approached with that recognition. I care too much about you for you to go through life thinking that those beliefs and ideas are not only valid, but, you know, uh, co-signed across the world. It's something that is just the way it is. I care too much about you to let you think that that's how we're going to roll in this space moving forwards. Attunement makes room to meet the person where they're at, but also creates room for those ideas to be expanded upon, explored, and where necessary, metabolized. And when we're creating space to explore positionality, attunement is absolutely necessary, because we can't get to intended destinations without accurately locating ourselves. And what positionality enables us to do is to create that room for young people to explore who they are, what they're bringing into the space, where those ideas come from, but also meet in that process of identification with no judgment or shame, but with the recognition I might challenge. I might explore that further with you. I might critique some of those ideas. And when I'm doing that, I'm not shaming you as the person, but I am exploring and critiquing and challenging those ideas that you hold. And here's where things get beautiful for me in the space. When you model that attunement in terms of how you bring yourself into the space, and when you bring attunement into the space, not only are young people's nervous systems more regulated in conversation, there's also room for them to consider different ideas and perspectives. And it isn't just because you as the facilitator will create that room for attunement, you've also got to model that too. I can be challenged in those spaces as well. My ideas can be explored and examined as well. I'm an active participant in that space as well. Because if we want to create room for attunement to exist in those spaces, what we have to do is we have to model what we seek.